Well, this depiction I have here is looks like fireworks, of course. And it's not from the point of view of celebration. It's from the point of view of the things I've been involved in as of late are rather explosive in nature. And so as a result of that, I have become involved in this with, and the topic that was selected here, I will have to say, Dr. Jerry Torreson's predominantly responsible for the title, in that he was aware of some of the things that I've been involved in, and when he asked me to join he suggested this title. I wish to emphasize that One Health is the concept that Dr. Marr has been the person predominantly responsible for getting it going. Had its very meager beginnings in the AVMA, and for those of you who are having trouble understanding what it really means, I can tell you that the board of the AVMA had trouble too. The first go-around, Roger wasn't able to get it through, and he had the help of myself and several others who served on the volunteer boards. I was on the councils, and I was on the Council on Public Health and Regulatory Veterinary Medicine, and I helped Roger in trying to get that message through. Also serving on the Animal Agriculture Liaison Committee there as a volunteer. We tried to get the message through. In the first go-around, we failed. And the second time, we were successful, and Roger was able to get funding through the AVMA to initiate the beginnings of a One Health concept, or better known as the One Health Initiative. And Roger, congratulations for that effort. And I think we're well on our way now to someday all of us communicating in similar terms. And when we say One Health, maybe we'll know what that means. As I mentioned, Dr. Jerry Torreson was the person that guided me here, and he's a member of your planning committee. And of course, Scott helped tremendously in making it happen. Well, my work for several years has been focused on issues in animal agriculture, but not just animal agriculture. It's all forms of agriculture. In that when I became a toxicologist, I tended to try to pull together the sciences that I had learned, which was the plant sciences as well as some animal sciences. And as a toxicologist, I was able to do some of that. And I realized very quickly that it made my background amenable to people who are litigating. And so that's how I got involved in some of this stuff. The litigation issues are becoming very significant. So significant, as you can see, you have in this meeting a group representing and saying to you, we do that stuff, and we want you to know about us. And so that's a very unusual happening in a group of animal agriculture folks, but it now is the real world in 2010. The way I'm going to address this today is that I'm going to share with you three fairly recent cases, litigated cases that represent some of these issues that we're talking about. And they, in fact, include all facets of One Health. The focus in this case is on the poultry industry, and it boils down simply to the application of poultry litter as a fertilizer for production of forages for livestock. But then, one step further, what happens to the litter once it's applied on the land for the production of forages, for the production of livestock? Does it all stay there? Does it all wind up in the grass? That question still remains. And then, if it doesn't all stay there, if there are constituents that get away, if you will, and do in fact get into streams and or lakes, what is the impact on the biota? And of course, if there's any indication that it might affect humans, certainly it has a much greater attention. Here's a little ad or brochure put together by some activists in Oklahoma. Once they realized this was an issue, they created this poultry waste disposal, Oklahoma water pollution. And this pretty much tells the story of why they're concerned. You look up at the top, there's some accumulation of poultry litter at the end of the field before it's going to be applied with an applicator. And then you can see below that an application in process where you have a truck that is loaded with poultry litter and being applied to the surface of the grass, creates some dust, creates some attention. And then over at the left of that, there's an aerial photograph of a whole bunch of poultry production houses in a string, or a complex, if you will. And then you see people swimming in a stream, and in this case, they're focusing on a particular stream that lots of folks float down that stream on rafts and or canoes annually, upwards of 250 to 300,000 a year. So they're saying, hey, what's happening here? What's the impact on me? The cases I'm going to share with you very briefly, just the highlight of these cases, are City of Tulsa et al. Versus Peterson Farms et al. Peterson Farms is a poultry production integrator in northwest Arkansas. And then there's Mary Green versus Alpharma et al. And the et al. There is 5 poultry integrators. And then there's the state of Oklahoma versus Tyson's Foods et al. And the top one and the bottom one were heard in federal court, and the one in the center was heard in district court. In order to describe these, what I've done here is just pulled the front page of an expert report that I prepared in the first case, for example, of Tulsa and the Tulsa Metropolitan Utility Authority versus poultry in this case. And you can see the defendants listed there with Tyson, George's, Cobb Ventris, Cargill, Simmons Foods. As Tyson has grown over the years, they actually have a variety of entities, and actually Tyson's is represented twice here. Cobb Ventris and Tyson are the same, or they're Tyson's own Cobb Ventris. And you see this one was, my report was in 2002. This was filed in 2001, and ultimately was resolved in 2004. And, well, it didn't come out so very well, but what this shows you where it happened. Right up in that extreme northeast corner of Oklahoma, you see that little green space up there. That represents the watershed that is shown in front of you there, and that's called the Ucha-Spavinaw watershed. And Spavinaw is famous for a variety of things. Number one, it is the birthplace of Mickey Mantle. And number two, it is the original water source for the city of Tulsa. And then once the city grew, they needed more water, so they built Ucha. And Ucha is from the name of an Indian tribe, and they have their village, or one of their villages, right on the bank of Ucha, although not shown there. And this is the predominantly water supply for Tulsa. You see J up at the top. It's a water supply for J. And not shown over on the Arkansas side. By the way, you have one county in Oklahoma and one county in Arkansas represented here. So you get a complex set of issues. The Arkansas side has a little community called Decatur, right on the bank of the Spavinaw Creek. And Decatur dumps its wastewater treatment water into Spavinaw Creek. And they have a poultry processing plant also in Decatur. So there's quite a bit of wastewater going down there. And as you know, and in particular the EPA folks who are here, recognize that they allow wastewater to be dumped from water treatment facilities at the level of 1 part per million for phosphorus. That's the current guideline. Well, Spavinaw was a big issue. The allegations were that phosphorus loading causes eutrophication, and that eutrophication results in taste and odor problems, but it also causes increased cost in treatment of the water for them. And then they've got that risk of, if we do treat it and we add more chlorinated disinfectants, we also create more of the disinfectant products that are of concern of human health. And trihalomethanes being one of the big ones that's similar to chloroform, by the way. And there are several of those compounds that are created when you continue to add chlorine to water, depending on what the constituents are. So that was an issue. And then there's the issue of blue-green algae. And most of you have probably had some experience with that over time, particularly livestock farmers that in the south run into this, but it happens in the north too. I can remember some issues in Minnesota, in which a small pond, shallow pond, a lot of fertilization took place near, both nitrogen and phosphorus fertilization, and then runoff into the ponds, and then warming climate and algal bloom. And that's a very good opportunity for blue-green algae to flourish. And if they flourish, and under certain circumstances, they will produce cyanotoxins. And cyanotoxins are very potent, causing tremendous issue with livestock, particularly cattle. And so that carried over into this issue. If we are having algal blooms in Lake Ucha and Lake Spavinaw, and we can identify blue-green, and cyanotoxins must be there. Therefore,
this focused on has about 111,000 acres, as you see there. 49 million broilers produced there annually. A few turkeys, 22,000 hogs. There are 20,000 beef cows resident. And some dairy cows resident. Not mentioned there is about 15,000 white-tailed deer roam the area. And how did the lawyers hope to recover damages in this case? And on what basis? They cited CERCLA. And that is a law of which EPA has a lot to do with. The Comprehensive Environmental Response Compensation and Liability Act. They also cited the National Contingency Plan, which is a means of recovery or a response. And those two were the reliance for which the litigation was brought forward. It was all based on phosphorus being a hazardous substance. And if you look in the list of hazardous substances that are published in the Federal Registry, you can find P there, phosphorus there. Well, before I go into that, I will tell you that one of my jobs was to try to interpret the EPA regs pertaining to that and say something about phosphorus and it being included as a hazardous substance. I did do that, and my conclusion was that EPA excluded fertilizers, which they do. But they don't say anything. That was based on commercial fertilizers. They don't say anything about organic fertilizers. So it left a big question. So the judge had to rule on that. Is phosphorus a hazardous substance? Case number 2. This one is a bit more interesting and somewhat confusing. This one says Mary Green et al. Versus Alpharma et al. And the et al. Here is 5 poultry producers.
Mary Green had cancer. And she lived in a little community where a whole bunch of other people had cancer. And they had concluded that the reason for the cancer was the poultry. And they acquired litigation support out of 2 states, Louisiana and Texas. And this one was in 2005. This is a picture of another watershed just south of the one I showed you a moment ago. And I show you this watershed because I'm going to talk to you about that one a little later. But the point here is Prairie Grove, Arkansas. On the Arkansas side of that, you see a circle, a red circle around, and I wrote Prairie Grove in there. It's just a little community there, not a very large community, just to the west of Fayetteville, Arkansas, in Washington County. And they had believed that they had a higher incidence of cancer than other communities of their size, and they believed that the relationship was with the poultry industry and litter being applied to the land. It's a farming community. About 4,000 people live there. And all around the community, you can see fescue and Bermuda grass pastures, and in the spring and summer and fall, you can see the application of poultry litter from time to time on that to produce the grass. And the other poultry companies that included the et al. In the litigation are shown at the bottom. The allegations here is airborne contaminants from poultry litter that cause illness and cancer. And the focus was on roxarsone, 3-nitro. And you folks, many of you that have dealt with swine and poultry know what those are. Those are feed additives approved by the Food and Drug Administration many years ago. In fact, they were approved almost before the Food and Drug Administration became in existence, in the 50s. And have been put in feed ever since. And their use, of course, is for growth promotion as well as control of coccidia in poultry. And it's an organic arsenical, as you probably know. And, of course, the allegation included pathogenic bacteria and fungi, of which they named a bunch of them. The basis of the claims are that organic arsenicals biodegrade, both in poultry litter as well as after it's applied, and they biodegrade to the point that inorganic arsenic is available for exposure to the environment as well as to humans. And they went a step further and said it biodegrades not only to inorganic arsenic, it biodegrades to arsine gas. And cumulative, you have an issue for humans. Likewise, the bacteria and the fungi can become airborne. Case number 3. Now, this one's got a lot more stuff on it, as you can see, because this was a state entity that decided to sue the poultry industry, and they sued a bunch of them. The state of Oklahoma sues the poultry integrators that have poultry operations, or they have growers in the Illinois River watershed. And that's the one I showed you earlier where Prairie Grove was located. And Illinois gets its name probably from Illinois. It is believed that it got its name from a group of Creole traders who were trading with the Indians many years ago, and they had a base in Illinois. Then they came down the Mississippi and then back up the Arkansas River, and then ultimately up to this little river, of which they named it, the Illinois River. Well, anyway, this one, my report was in 2008, but this case was actually filed in 2005, and it still has not been determined, the final outcome of it. We finished litigation trial and closing arguments February the 17th. Well, we're back to the Illinois River watershed. Again, two sides of the state line of Arkansas and Oklahoma, which means
When you have that issue and you have lawyers involved, you have to bring in federal law as well as state law, and that has been going on. So here are the claims. We had a lot of claims here. We have pathogenic microbes, and the real concern, of course, is the people swimming or canoeing or boating, and possibly groundwater. Antibiotics from the production of poultry. Antibiotic-resistant bacteria. Hormones resulting in endocrine disruption. In other words, the wildlife are affected. Phosphorus and other macronutrients, and specifically labeled the micronutrients of arsenic, copper, zinc, aluminum. They named a few others too. And also, they pointed out eutrophication again, taste and odor, increased disinfection products, and blue-green algae cyanotoxins. This river, and this river watershed is quite interesting. It was designated by the state of Oklahoma in 1977 to be a scenic river. When they did that, they put special requirements on it. They said, the Scenic Rivers Commission said, we will focus on getting phosphorus concentration to 0.037 parts per million by 2012. Keep in mind, I told you a moment ago that the EPA allows wastewater treatment plants to dump their wastewater treatment at 1 part per million phosphorus. And with that being the case, you look down to number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, fifth one down. The Illinois River is the recipient of treated water from 12 wastewater treatment facilities. There are times of the year when the predominant water, or the base flow, is that of wastewater treatment facilities. It'll be pretty hard to get it to 0.037 during that period. Well, it is the lake that is impounded on, or that impounds this river, this Illinois River, is called Lake Tenkiller. It was actually called Tenkiller Ferry. This is in the Cherokee Nation, if you will. And Oklahoma is divided into many Indian nations. So we have nations within a nation. And this one is in the Cherokee Nation. According to the treaties, the rivers and the streams belong to the Indians. So we got lots of issues in this case. It's about a 1 million acre watershed, mostly pasture, Bermuda grass and fescue. But in this case, 150 million poultry are produced annually. There's about 200,000 cattle resident there annually. Only about 100,000 of those being cows and replacements. 11,000 dairy cows, 150,000 pigs, 8,000 horses. That's a very conservative estimate, probably more like 15,000 horses. And there's about 30,000 white-tailed deer there. Again, back to CERCLA. And in this case, a new addition. RCRA. That's also EPA oversight. And that's the Solid Waste Disposal Act. And by the way, CERCLA is the Superfund Act. The Solid Waste Disposal Act was brought into vogue here in that the lawyers, the plaintiffs' lawyers, believed that poultry litter was a solid waste that was being disposed of. And their effort was to prove that that's what it is, not that it is fertilizer. It's solid waste that's being disposed of. And with that in mind, and the high risk of affecting health, they brought a preliminary injunction against the poultry industry, in this case the poultry integrators. And that preliminary injunction was based on bacteria. It said bacteria in the streams are a high risk to the people who use them, therefore we should stop application of poultry litter to this watershed now. And the judge was asked to do that. And then they have other claims, several of them. Well, what happened in all these cases? We'll look at case one. Case one was the city of Tulsa versus poultry integrators. In this case, the judge listened to the arguments and said, phosphorus is a hazardous substance.
It appears in the list of hazardous substances. My argument was it is listed, but it is only based on elemental phosphorus. Elemental phosphorus is a hazardous substance. But all of the compounds of phosphorus, and in particular orthophosphorus, the entire life processes depend upon phosphorus, or orthophosphates. And that's the reason it should not be listed as a hazardous substance. I pointed out that there are many nitrogen compounds that are not listed as hazardous substances, and many that are. And I pointed out that there are other phosphorus compounds that are not hazardous substances, while some are. Didn't matter. She said, no, we're going to call it a hazardous substance because it's there on the list. Well, then the defendant said, they got all the experts together and said, let's look at the science that was used in this argument. And a model, a SWOT model was used. And I certainly was not a modeler, so I couldn't help a lot, but I knew a little bit about modeling, so I was able to talk somewhat with them. So they initiated what's called a Daubert hearing. And a Daubert hearing is just one of those legal things. It goes back to a case of Daubert versus Mary Aldal many years ago. Mary Aldal had that Daubert had brought the case against them, but the reason that Daubert was able to prevail is that they questioned the reliability of the science. And so that was done, and we brought this, or the defendants brought the Daubert hearing here against the science and prevailed. It didn't keep the people who developed that from testifying and being part of the court case, but as a result of that, it broke the back of the plaintiff's argument, and so they began to talk settlement. Settlement did ensue with a special master created to oversee the watershed, and the poultry industry paid $7 million to finance that. They thought they were financing it. $6.5 million went to the law firm, and $500,000 went to the city of Tulsa and the development of the special master, where they could build a phosphorus index specifically for that and not pollute the water and that was the issue. Case 2. In this case, by the way, we had to try this case twice. The judge first said poultry should be included as a pharmaceutical issue. This is Alpharma. He was sort of overlooking the pathogen. Well, said
poultry should be in it, but we'd already tried these with Alpharma, and Alpharma prevailed. Come poultry industry having to do the case again, they all prevailed. And the reason is they were not able to prove their case the right to create that cause and effect relationship. It was probably, in one case here, most fortuitous for the defense that the plaintiff chose a cancer case of leukemia to start with. And arsenic has never been identified as causing leukemia. That was a problem for them. Case number 3. Before this case actually came to trial, the EPA looked at the issue about phosphorus from fertilizers and realized that organic fertilizers were not included, and did make a statement that it does not. Phosphorus from fertilizer does not qualify as a hazardous substance. That helped alleviate one of them. Essentially took the circular or Superfund side out of it, but it left RCRA, and the judge ruled that RCRA does not apply in the case of poultry litter, that it is in fact a fertilizer, and it is used accordingly. It is not a disposable waste or a solid waste that is disposed of only, that it actually has other value. And then their preliminary injunction was denied. They were not able to prove that the bacteria from poultry litter actually winds up in the stream, and in turn someone got sick from it. That
that chain of events was not possible to prove. So the judge ruled against the preliminary injunction. However, as I said, we just finished the closing arguments in mid-February. The judge has all the time he wants to make a ruling on the remaining claims, and there are several of them. And we will see what happens.